Hello. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Maliti Brahanameskal. Today is the 69th day since the Ethiopian government began its war on Tigray. For 69 days, most Tigrayans have not been able to reach their loved ones. Most Tigrayans have no idea how their families are doing and whether they're alive. We don't know the situation on the ground. Only now are we starting to get some little bits of information from people who have either escaped from Tigray, and the news is harrowing. The news is devastating. I want to start the show by reading some comments that were posted on Twitter by people who have learned that their family members have been killed in the war on Tigray. These are innocent civilians. The first comment: my young brother, Dawit Gide from Adigrat, was killed with his 6 friends by Eritrean troops at his home. Civilians are being targeted. I just heard my uncle, Gabra Anania Redda, was killed by the Eritrean army with his entire family of 13, including his son-in-laws, in Maikado, Tigray. My beloved cousin, Shushai Gabrahans, got killed by Eritrean troops in Gabrasirnai in front of his store. His father passed away after hearing that his son was killed. I want to share my story too. My mom's aunt in Rama, Mama Nagisti, was killed by Eritrean troops. We learned this recently. The news is really devastating. We know that the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said no civilians have been targeted, no one has killed, everything is calm on the ground, but it's not true. And today we have a really powerful story to share with you from an eyewitness who was in Hawzien when the war began. Zenabu is going to share her story and the various atrocities that she saw firsthand. I have her daughter with us as well somehow, who's going to be translating for her mom. We've decided not to show Zenabu's face for safety reasons. So thank you both for being here. Hi, Samhal. Hi, Zenabu.
Hi, Melita.
Thank you. So, Zenabu, you were in Hawzien, if I'm not mistaken, for 3 weeks before the war began. Can you tell us, how did you figure out, or how were you notified that the country was at war? Because what we hear is that there was really no warning. It was pretty much a surprise attack. So how did you learn that Hawzien was being attacked and that Tigray was being attacked?
Okay. بحاوزين دي خجمر or in general مقالة بحاوزين دي خجمر.
Hawzien مسمعك when you first heard the attack.
Yeah, Hawzien between نبلت الله between Hawzien war زبها البوتا أو تخص تجميرو كأو سبز مصنيرهم قويم قال ملا ናብ Hawzien ቀሪቦም እዮም ይመጽለው ተባሂሉ ሮማ መጽኡ ማለት እዩ so family member ዝኾነ ኪዱ ካብዚ ረሓቁ ይመጽለው እዮም ታርጌትን ይገብርለው እዮም ን young people ንመናእሰይ ዝኾኑ ገለ ኢሎምና ማለት እዩ so we just ቦታ ይረኸብናን ቻንስ ይረኸብናን ራን ጌርና ስቆልና.
Okay, so we heard about the attacks first from people coming from Nebalet and surrounding areas saying that the explosions were getting closer and closer to Hawzien.
Yeah, but hariu መጽኦም የሙን ሳተሙን ኩለዚ ገርለው እዮም ሰውልና ሃዲምና.
The troops were getting closer and closer, so we ran.
And how did you know? Because there were a couple of instances when you thought that you might be at war, but it wasn't, right? Wasn't there an instance where there was some shooting or something that you heard? How did you know this was real?
ቅድሚኡ is when ረውዕ መዓልትና ዕዳጋ ሰባት ቆርቆሮ ገለ ወቂዖም ፕሌን መጽኡ ተባሂሉ ከምኡ ገይሩ ሰብ ሃዲሙ ነይሩ.
So
a week before.
A week before in the beginning, on market day, people were hearing planes and stuff like that. So they had already began to flee. So there were rumors of it beforehand.
Plane ይኮንን ቆርቆሮ ወቂዖም ሰባት ፈሊጦም ለያው ሰርቆ ዝደለ ከም ዝገበሩ ነይሮም. ፕላን ዝገበሩ ነይሮም. So ከም መሲልና ነይሩ ፎልስ መሲልና ነይሩ መጀመሪያ. so እዮም ሓደ family really you ተራእዮም እዮም በእግሮም ይመጽለው እዮም they getting close you guys have to ብድሕሪኡ ኣታ ከድና ወፂና at least ተመሊስና ዋላ 2 hours one day ተመሊስና ክንመለስ ኢልና ወፂና ፈረስ ብስሩጉን ኣይኣመናን ነርና.
So in the beginning no one believed it. There were talks of it, but no one believed it. And then there were people that were coming and saying that, you know, the rumors were true and that the troops were closing in on Hawzien.
So when you ran, when you realized that, yeah, we are being attacked, the war has actually started, first of all, I'm sure you were shocked. What were you thinking? And then what did you do? What did you grab? Where did you go? What did you do? What was the first thing you did?
honest بسرونه አመን ኩነራ I just ምሳይ ዘሎ brother ምስ ሕዋተይ ገለና አቶም ክስታይ ክገብር አይደለኩም አይከደን ኢለዮም ነራ but we have to go መስወልኒ even empty backpack ይሒዘ ኸይደ just to document
so in the beginning
anything ብስሩ.
In the beginning, I didn't believe it. My brothers and my sisters were the ones who convinced me that I had to go because I was going to stay. I didn't think that it was true. I grabbed a backpack, but it was empty. And we didn't take anything.
Yeah.
And your family got separated, right? You didn't all, I mean, it's chaos, right? Everybody's running at this point, and your family got separated.
Separate when my mom, Miss brother and Mr. خلت قلت كوينن أنا my brother and Miss Dok كوينة خدنا.
So one of my brothers, my grandma, and some children stayed behind, and then I left with my brother and 2 other family members.
And where did you guys go? You just ran for the hills, right? Did you know where you were going?
First, we don't know. Just قلنا كمن كابو ካብ ዓዲግራት ዝመጹ ሰባት when we information ክንረክብ ከለና before ዓዲግራት መጽኦም ነይሮም እዮም a lot of people when ካብ ዓዲግራት መጽኦም እዮም ታይና ሰምዒና straight ሒዞም እዮም ዝኸዱ straight ዝኸዱ ባንክ ገለ ዝረኸቡ ወይ ቀትሉ እዮም ከምኡ ሰርች ልገብሩ ገዛ ምዃኑ ይፈለጥን straight ምስ ከዱልና ምስ ሓለፉ ኣታ ክሮስ ገይሮም ክሓልፉ እዮም ናብ ካልእ ቦታ ክንምለስ ኢና ኢልና ኢና ኸይድና.
So in the beginning there were people coming from Adigrat saying that they were just going to attack like the main highways and the main roads, so they didn't think that Hawzien would be under attack either, and so they just went. They had no idea where they were going to go. They just began to run.
And you said you were out in the hills basically. Who were you staying with? Just random people that you met? Yeah. Or
መጀመሪያ random people but they know us by family but they are not really very close family ኮንን አው ጸኒሕና like 20 minutes 40 minutes but ወረስና ኾነ ኸይዱ ኻኡ ባምብና ጎሩ.
So in the beginning, we ran for the hills. In the beginning, there were people like friends of family members, people that we didn't really know but knew of through family. And so we started there, but then the bombs started getting closer to there as well. So they told them that they had to leave and go somewhere else.
Oh, wow. So the house that you were at told you had to leave.
Yeah. Now we must let you hiskum ikhum. Now you were a soon when a lot bambina unameza so kidna na just oil ammi uswana botata is bad come underground out akimna khofina.
They told us that the people were coming and they were getting closer, so we took, and they said that we had children, so we had to leave, and so we took the children and we went underground. Like
what were you thinking at this point? Did you think you were going to die? I mean, what were your thoughts at that point? You're hearing the fighting getting closer, or you're hearing the bombs, and you're fleeing for your life, obviously. What were you thinking? What was going through your mind at that time?
To be honest with you, I don't think you got nera ajokum galay qolci waqti slo zinawaru ba out inside wadina ina baqa qatlina yemile yenera btami farih ba I was thinking na atom gin it's going to be okay no tahani galay ulom nera qolci waqti nera everybody but ana nera khabatum strong but inside empty and I'm not gonna.
I told everyone to stay strong and don't worry that we were going to be okay, and there were small children and everyone was just hysterical crying, but even though I told them to be strong and that we were going to be okay, in my heart, I thought that we were going to die.
Mm. Mm. And so you ended up being in those hills for 12 days? Is that how long you were there before you returned back to Hawzien?
Yeah.
To the city?
Yeah, 12 days. We got far. Almost for 4 hours.
Every day we just kept going to different places. Maybe for 3 or 4 days we kept traveling. We didn't stay in one area at all. So we did that for about 12 days.
Just changing locations as it got closer and closer. Wow. Tell me about, there was an incident when you were there with a young man who was shot. Tell me about that.
enough to get one. Finally had a gazatina. Someone didn't come and Muhan and I am just 7 step gully one related, but not related to one. Our nearna. Bambina أنتقل مسكدنا one gaza zona. Safe zona na كلها atina. The young.
How many people were there too?
Almost more than the Miss family 15 people. نحنا نفعلت 15 people. يلا صرت 5 سنين يلا. Brother mosquito.
So 15 people.
Yeah.
Yes. So there were 15 people in the home. They weren't close family members either. They were distant relatives.
እዚኦም ብዘይ ተምሰብ ገዛ እዮም ተምሰብ ገዛ እውን ካልኦት ነይሮም ካልኦት ፋሚሊ እውን ሓዲሞም ዝመፁ ነይሮም ኣብኡ so around 30 ገለ ንኸውን ኢና together.
So there were other people there. There was 15 that came, but with the people there, it was about 30 people that were there total.
Wow. And this probably isn't a big home, right? This is probably a 1 room or 2 room type of house.
The house was very small. The kitchen, the room, everything was 1 room.
Wow. So, okay. So 30 people in this 1 room now, and someone comes. Do you hear screaming, or do you hear, how does this young man, who we find out later was shot by Eritrean soldiers, how does he come in the picture? Do you hear someone screaming, or how does it happen?
Screaming, navache, all blood queen after Lahana Kisna Yednerna, he jumped after the Kisna Yednerna. It's not Arat, but homemade medals on another. I don't know.
So he came in, he was crying, and there was blood everywhere. He was bleeding, so he came in sobbing, crying, and he laid kind of like something similar to a cot, not necessarily a bed, but he kind of jumped over the people that were there and laid himself out.
So he came into the house. He came into your house.
Yeah, not my house. Not a gazakona, not to the Tassalan night.
Right.
So now you, but when Navache, not ways, no, nobody happy, but I'm Horiam Nerum Kulom because I am dead.
So he came in and he was screaming and yelling because he was in so much pain, and no one was happy because they were scared that he was going to lead people into the home. So it was a safety risk. So no one wanted him there as well.
Yeah, I mean, you have no idea if he's a soldier or he's being followed by soldiers or who he is at this point. But he comes in the house and he's bleeding and screaming, and everyone's trying to get him to be quiet. When do you realize that he's been shot, other than the fact that you see blood everywhere?
He was holding his arm, so, and he was drenched, like his jacket, his whole entire body was covered in blood. So I knew right away that he was shot.
Wow. So what did you do next?
Yeah, مسابلون من تاكم أطولوا مسالكم أبانك يسرح إلى مني ساموا كوانا زفولت أسبنيرو he work secret قبل يسرح أباك so بقيو سؤال النايو بقى بتعمي أبسط أينيرو بقى nobody كل سب كوري ينيرو.
He kept crying and we all kept begging him to be quiet. One of the people there recognized him as a security officer at a bank, and everyone was just begging him to be quiet, but he was yelling in pain.
I know. Mokira a broken heart near the just Mokira, but I should go to clean Geralo. that's why ክሕግዞ ሞኪረ ኣነ I'm the only one.
I was the only one who wanted to help him. Everyone else wanted him to leave because he was risking the entire home safety. So I grinded up some garlic and I attempted to help him. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was so heartbroken. I was in pain seeing how he was hurting.
How did you know to get garlic? How did you know that would help him?
ባኮም ቀደም ሰብ እንድሕርነት እዩ ገለ if they don't have alcohol ጻዕዳ ሽጉርቲ ኢንፌክትድ እዩ ጽቡቕ እዩ ኢንፌክትድ ይትኾነን ኢኻ ገለ ኢለን I heard them ጥቀመ ካብ ገለ ሰማየ ነይረ.
When I was younger and people would get hurt or they would, you know, have open wounds and stuff, they would say that to use garlic so that I wouldn't be infected and stuff. So I remember that from early childhood.
Wow. That's amazing that your instinct kicked in that way and that you thought about that. Okay, so you get garlic, you grind it up, and you're putting it on his wound?
Yeah, clean ገረየ ብስዋ they don't have alcohol like ስዋ ነይሩ most ገዛ ዝሃውና ብኡ ገይረ ሓፂበዮ. So one guy ሰብኣይ እውን ንኤካ ደ idea ኢለዮ idea ክትኣስር because I'm not professional but when I told him ኢድካ move ጎረ ኢለዮ I know ኣይተሰበረን ኣብ ስጋ እዩ እኒኦ but I don't want him to lose a lot of blood. So ነፀላ ጌርና I put ሓምኩሽቲ and then ሰብኣይ I told him calm down. سؤال because أنا ونسيب نأخا ونسيب خشع حكمنا زي له أنا حجزك أيله مسؤولة ترى أنا تم سؤال كان مسح حجزه مني.
I asked someone else to help me as well because I had no idea what I was doing. I used suwa to clean out the wounds.
Garlic.
I mixed it with the garlic and I used the suwa to kind of cover the wound. And then I asked another man to help me tie it. I kept begging him to be quiet. I told him that if he was quiet, that I would help him and that he was going to be okay.
Yeah. So.
And he was asking you to kill him, right? He was in so much pain. What was he saying?
أنا من ما يطيقكم نقتلني بجلجيركم قتلني that's big favor نعيه قتلني.
He said, I'm not asking you guys for anything. I'm asking you to just do me a huge favor and just help me get out of my misery. Please kill me. Just kill me. Wow. So you clean his wound you clean the blood with suwa and garlic, and then you bandage him up. What did you use to bandage him with?
Netzala, you know, cause lemina netzala, you know, just cotton netzala, maqannet gabro. So we cover because it's not even brand new. It's used upon a netzala. So we put the hamkush tinjara zgagor hamkush together. That way infected kayawun bugerna asirna yo. Stop the blood and then they come galana gargera to give you to lifted it.
So I used like a clean like a cotton
not clean.
Oh, I'm sorry. It wasn't clean. It was like a dirty a piece of a blanket like a cotton. I ripped it. Yeah, netzala, like a covering and I ripped it and then I helped tie it above the wound. And I used like ashes to kind of disinfect it because it was very dirty, so I used that so that it wouldn't get infected to tie it to stop the blood.
I'm amazed that your mental clarity was what it was in the middle of warfare. I mean, you're scared to death and you're still able to think clearly enough in terms of how to treat his wound and how to wrap it. That's really, I mean, the resilience of Tegaro people is really incredible. That's amazing. And then how did he do? Was he able to calm down at that point or, you know, what happened next?
Listen to her. Samaya. Doctor, he thinks, you know, I have idea. Doctor, Samaya. Listen to her. Samaya.
There was a priest there and he was telling him to listen to her or to listen to me because I'm a doctor. And he kept saying that I was sent by God. He was saying that I was sent by God to help. So,
like I know when comes they felt queen actegor when
it's 4 o'clock.
Comes حجوزه قينا كحجزيخا survive تجبريخا until we get clean.
I was telling him that he'd be okay. I didn't act like I didn't know what I was doing. I acted like I was confident, and I told him that he was going to survive and that he was going to be fine.
But you're not a doctor, right?
I'm not.
I know they kept saying she's a doctor. Listen to her. You're not a doctor.
Not even close. I don't have any idea. Just saying it. but just for a third class. That's it.
Wow, that's incredible. So he survived, right? I'm assuming that.
After Wednesday, መፅት ዝኾነ ሰብ ጠይቐ survive ገይሩ transportation ምስ ጀመረ እንድሕር ረኺቦም ክወስድዎ እዮም survive ገይሩ even ሽዑቱ ተረስቲልኒ I ask ጥሕኒ ገይረ ካብ ገይረ በፅቢፀ ሂወየ to stay strong ንሽተ sugar ገይረ ጥሕኒ ገይረ ካብ ገይረ help him in a feel better inside, you know, just someone ከምኡ ገይረ ምሕጋዜ but still I have broken heart.
I asked about him later. They did say that he made it, and I felt bad because, you know, we didn't have any supplies or anything, so I made do with what we had. And
but lately now he's still pain.
But he was in a lot of pain. He still cries in the middle of the night. He cries all the time. There was still no access. Sorry.
No, I was saying, and what did she say? She made him a drink. You never give. You told me something about you never give someone water when they're bleeding in this way. So you made him a drink with tahni, a drink in commonly.
I ask her tahni lani latin tahni
I asked the people who lived there if they had anything, and they mixed the water and the tahni together, and they gave me what they had to give to him because I knew that I couldn't give him water.
Yeah, to make him
so that I could give him some strength too as well.
Wow. So you likely saved, I mean, not likely, you saved his life. That's
temporarily.
Yeah, temporarily. So tell me, so all in all, moving from place to place, you were in the mountains and the hills for about 12 days. And then you decided to come back to Hawzien, to the city. Why did you decide to come back to the city? How did you know it was safe enough to come back? Or what pushed you back into the city?
The reason why, now when you day to day, now around in the so Hawzien won ብዙሕ ሰሞይ ተባሂሉ that we discuss ገርና ምስ family ምስቶም ቆልዑ ኸይድና ንሕና ክንከድ what the point, you know, my mama won what happened كرألني so either way safety ኮይኑ ክመውት እየ I decide to go back to check my family ምስ family ወላ ክመውት but I don't want how ኩላህና ክንከደ አይደለኹን separate ኮይኑ መጽአ kids and my brother's wife.
At that point, there were military troops around the area, so they had already begun getting closer, and I realized that if I'm going to die, I would die with my family, and my mom was still back in Hawzien, so I decided to go back, and there were lots of talks of people being killed and deaths in Hawzien, so I felt like I had to go check on my family, and with my brother, we discussed it with my brother and his wife as well. We decided to separate, and I said that I would go, and I took his wife and his kids with me, and we started to go back to Hawzien.
And when you got back to Hawzien, what did you see?
Before Hawzien ክትኣቲ I don't know. This area ብጣዕሚ ጨነ ነይሩ which one is me ተዳሓርየ ፊግራ ኣውታ ኢለ ስጋውን ሓረዱ እዮም ዝደርዩ ወለ ይውድእውን ሰውን ሞይቱ ተባሂሉ but everywhere ናይ ሻምፓይን ናይ ቢራ እናሰተዩ እዮም ፓሪ እዮም ዝገብሩ ይሰትዩ እዮም everywhere trash everywhere biscuit everywhere ናይ ድንኳን is trash.
Before I even got into Hawzien, the roads, everything just along the way was trash. There were beer bottles. There were like champagne bottles. There were leftover animals. It smelled really bad. I remember the smell. And there were people. There were like wrappers of food. It was just completely trashed. And dark.
Go ahead. And tell me about who you saw. So we know that up until now it's been denied that there are Eritrean troops, but we know that the Eritrean troops are there. So tell me who you saw. I know you said your house was looted. banks were robbed, stores were completely looted. Tell me about when you got to your house and it was looted and who you saw doing that, because they came back multiple times, right?
Oh, of course, more than before say they wrap already. There is no blanket, there is no TV, there is no my brother's kids' clothes, everything wrapped. We try each other niskhun matsikhilen muslimam tahazina, but we stay in one room because there is no blankets, there is no anything to get close. Everybody had khadqas. We stay in one room because kali ma deqasina wonallo kali nay migun goral ba kullu rap kera mo emosidamo.
So, and when I initially got to my house, it was empty. Everything was gone. There weren't blankets. There weren't food. There weren't kids' clothes. Weren't there. There was no water. There was nothing. I was hysterical. My mom was hysterical. Just that we were even alive. We began to all stay in one room and stay close to each other for body heat because we had no jackets, no blankets, there was nothing left in my house.
You even said they took the diapers in the house, right? They took diapers, they took pots, they took everything.
They were having rash everything because nobody take a shower, nobody water on you. So we tried to change them clothes. Nothing, back was a whole.
When I came back with the kids, there was no food. They had rashes because they hadn't been able to shower or bathe for days in the hills. So when we got there, we couldn't find any clothes. We couldn't find anything either. There was no baby formula. Everything that we had left behind was gone as well.
And there's no electricity and there's no running water. Everything had been shut off also at this point, right?
Everything search misgobaru search nagoru nahaleyu نأتن ون سيرش خجور ون كريء ون زي ون flashlight نيراتهم تقدر حدقو خلاتهم كودو كان زمزوه.
It was complete darkness. The only time that there was even light was the flashlights that they had brought in to search the homes when the troops came.
And so your house was empty when you came, but then they came back again. So what did they come back for, and how many times did they come back?
More than 4 or 5 times. Every time يمصوا خلقت already search ገርኩም ኢኹም already ወሲድኩም ኢኹም excuse ገውሩ በርቢን ሃባና ማይ መምልእ ይብሉ በርበረ ይብሉ every time ካብ ካልኦት ዝመጹ ንሕና ይኮንናን እዮም ዝብሉና. We didn't search the house ንሕና ይኮንናን ካልኦት እዮም መጽኦም. So every time እዮም ዝመጹ every time እዮም ዝመጹ.
They came daily when I was there, and we would tell them that our homes were already searched, that we had nothing left. There was nothing to take, and they would say that, it wasn't us that came, it was someone else. And they would still they would ask us for barbara, they would ask us for spices, they would ask us for containers to take water, like pots, pans. They asked for everything, and they still searched us even though we told them we had nothing.
And it was a pretty sophisticated operation, right? Like I know you told me that they would take things and then they would give them to someone else and tell them where to drop it off in Eritrea, right?
So different كنكلنا na church big عباي تراك مكينة كلهم بكورتن جيرهم شوب نابعتهم staff pack جيرهم. So when the driver نتمسوا زخيد نمن دفرع صحيو they have names. نابي كم زوج هو من دفرع عد خلا زينا نابزي توصح ناولو night serve staff work الفي خدان باك ناغورنا سددو fridge everything.
So when they packed the trucks with all the goods that they had stolen.
inside the house
this wasn't inside the house too. This was along the way. Like we'd see their big trucks filled with goods, and everyone would have it like boxed up and labeled to which family member or which city they wanted it delivered to, from anything from jewelry, gold, pots and pans, you name it.
Wow, that's it's so shocking to hear. So they're sending these like packages basically home.
Military had when even search 3 has big golden sign money.
When they would come to search our homes, you could see their pants were filled with jewelry and gold and silver, and they even made noise like their pockets were overflowing with stuff that they had stolen.
Were you shocked to see the Eritreans there when you came back to the city? Was that a shock to you?
Yeah, definitely. But
I had heard things before I got there, but when I seen it with my own eyes, I was extremely shocked. I couldn't believe it.
Wow. It's really shocking, especially to us, because, you know, the prime minister has said over and over and over again, there are no Eritreans, there are no Eritreans, they're not there. And every story that's coming out, the most devastating things that are happening by Eritrean troops. And now, of course, there's lots of evidence, satellite imagery and all of this to show that, and eyewitness accounts like yours. Tell me about the food situation. I know you said you all were rationing food. There was an issue because there are no generators. The generators were taken. And so even if people did have certain grains, they can't grind them. Tell me about the food situation.
Some people, 5 pounds. Some people, even day to day, you know, they don't have that much budget. Some people won't
it was heartbreaking. It was so sad. Some people were literally starving. They had nothing. And then even other people who had pounds and pounds, they had no way to grind the food. So they still didn't have a way to eat it. It was very sad.
So night عادي people ሽማግሌን ምንታይ ተወስዱልና መጥሐንሲ እና generator so generator ክነምፀልኩም ኢና ላይን ሓዙ መጥሐን ክመጽእ
They kept promising us that they were going to get a generator and that we were going to be able to grind our food. So we all got into a line. People got into lines, just waiting for days. It was up to 3 days waiting for this generator to work so that they could grind the food that they had. And the generator never worked. It never.
Who's they? Who's they? Who told you that they're bringing a generator? Is this the air? I mean, who is it at that point? That's
one military people. Sabat ሽማግለ ኸይዶም why the generator gale belong to us belong government when it ambulance and stuff choose ገይሮም 5 people, you know, ከይደሞ ታገርናኩም ሕናዚና ህዝብ እዩ. It's not military stuff. ንምንታይ ዘይትሁና ኢለሞ so ካብና ባዓርና generator ክነምፀልክን ያይልዎም ኣብኡ ዝነበረ temporary ዝተመረፀ general ስንታዩ ይበሃል ካብ ደቡብ እዩ ኣዱ speak ትግርኛ before when ይፈልጥ ይነሩ Hawzien ኣብሸራሮ military ነሩ ይኻብ.
There were military officials that were saying that because the people we were begging them, like, this is not government funded, this is not from the government, like, these generators are for the people, like, we need this to survive. So they promised us, and they told everyone to stay in line and that it would come soon.
But it never came. The generators never came, and they never worked.
They brought it, but it didn't fit. There was no way for it to work, and never ended up working.
Some people after 3 days.
So there were people who waited for 3 days in line, and then ended up having to turn back and go home.
Wow. And you said you guys were rationing food at that point because you didn't know when you would get more food. So you were eating once a day. Tell me about that.
Yeah, example of Gazana Nevera, low food near one, but kids in the owner. Sometimes the adult, so in Nabuna Galas, we skip breakfast, dinner, let me talk on lunch in her. Some people will, they don't have even food, they will lump so items or some people can't stay alone, not on babies alone, care each other, sharing every night, caring.
So there were some people that had food, but we still had to ration it out. So usually they would sacrifice and give it to the young children because they needed to eat. And then there would be others who ate breakfast and then, you know, skipped until dinner the next day. And then there were other people who just didn't eat at all and would give it to the people who needed it more. So
Yeah, I was just going to say, what's sad about that is after everything's been looted, even if there were stores or places you can go and buy food, no one can access money. All of the banks are closed. So you have, even if you fix one issue, you still have the other. So how do you think people are doing now? I know you've left, but with hospitals being looted, with everything being gone, I mean, you can't even treat normal illness, let alone being shot, or how do you think that people are dealing with specifically the hunger issue, but just in general, having no electricity, having no way to, grind their food, or if they even have it?
Even if you had money, there was no way to buy anything. They robbed the entire store, so money didn't serve a purpose as well. They've already stolen the entire store, so there were no stores to even get food from, or supplies, or the banks had already been robbed, so there was no money even left in the city.
Before when internet lay never people won ganzab they suffering people still strong.
They're suffering, people are starving, they have nothing, but they're still remaining strong.
So madhan Hawzien to our kid cap بأجرها أو ولا بخصائص سرح توهايلو سنع بدنبي perfect equality but تقرقرة توهايلو people always أنحنيرم كل تمعت سلسة معت لاينا وتحينهم ساجم نيرم بفراي.
So before I left, there was another city about 2 hours outside of Hawzien, and they said that some people had a grinder that partially worked, so people had began the journey going there in order to grind their food.
Wow. So we're hearing a lot of stories now, really painful stories about women being trafficked in Adigrat, and we're hearing about rape on a scale and a level that's really unimaginable. There was an Ethiopian Defense Force member who was, a video was leaked where he was kind of challenging his comrades about the rapes that were happening. So we know that the situation is really dire for girls and women on the ground. Tell me about, you mentioned an incident of a young woman in your home who was almost raped, and you all were able to fortunately stop the situation. Tell me what happened.
Just nice brother, صرت نورت كل حياة شدنا even from Tigray, just كنا مساعتهم لرأس نكيد استحقزهم نايت تمهر مساعتهم. So when this situation happened, كم على حزام وامزهم. So when ودي أنفتش مس ودو صار شو ميزب بعلو grab كير وبيدرم مار إني نعيسر شخ جبريل which is nothing a bedroom mattress كل وسيدة موير ناو سيدوا. So مستتصوعت she don't answer me. زرفي I don't want to mention her name, but صوينا يان مسمع عليها. So sister ina أخيدها was because the fast or it's almost less more almost to door all the way كل زي يكون النيرو. So ده في أتاي تجور على خيدته رح كتر إني دليل no already search كيرك أخا مسافايت نقول.
So there was a young girl in our home. She came with my brother. She worked as a nanny in the daytime, and she would go to school at night. And she wasn't from Tigray. She was originally from Gondar. But the troops had came in to search our homes, and while they were searching our homes, they took her and said, show us the bedroom. And at that point, there was no bedroom because the mattress, everything was gone. So it was just an empty room. And we were all calling out her name. We kept calling her name, and we didn't get a response. And the door wasn't able to shut anymore because they had already busted it open. So when we entered into the room, we saw her there with the soldier.
Yeah, I was a wow.
He asked her to take off her shirt, and he had a gun to her head.
Yeah. So when
he told her that she couldn't respond to her name being called because we were all... So she had told us this afterwards, but she said the reason why she couldn't respond is because he had a gun to her head and said he would kill her if she said anything or if she answered us. and he had our top off when we entered the room, and luckily they had whistles that the other troops would blow when it was time to go, and in that moment the whistle went off, so they all left our home together. But
yeah,
that makes me really emotional, just to think about the level of devastation and how women are being violated, and that this young girl couldn't even respond when you were calling her name because there was a gun to her head, and he's asking her to take, or I guess he had her shirt off at that point. What if you hadn't gotten to the room on time? What if his fellow troops hadn't whistled and said it was time to go? What would have happened? I mean, this is the reality for these girls on the ground, and it's so heartbreaking. And I'm so glad that, it didn't happen to her, but it's happening to so many others. It's just devastating. You gave me a really chilling account of dead bodies. Tell me about that again, and how many dead bodies you counted. And also, you talked about how people can't bury their loved ones, or if they can secretly, then they are secretly burying their loved ones. But tell me about that again. Tell me about the dead bodies and how many you personally counted.
I was around 140 አካባቢ Hawzien ና ካብ Hawzien ንሕና ንፈልጦ some people ሳይን ገይሮም እዮም ከበርኩታ ገይሮም ትርእዮም ኣብኡ ገይሮምዎም ኣለዉ when I go ናብ ቸርች ገላኽተ don't pass this way ናብዚ ኸይትኸዲ ኩሉ ባዲ እኒሄዎ እዩ ተባሂሉ but in general ምስ ገለ ኩሉ ሜክሲኮ ሜልኩም እዩ but when I ask Hawzien ዝነበራ ፋሚሊ almost 140 ቆፂረ but 140 ኩሎም ብዓይነ ይረኽብዎም but more than 70-80 ግን ኩሉ ሳይን እምኒ ዘለዎ ኾታ ዘለዎ some of them ስኡሎም ባክያርድ ከበር ገይሮምዎም እዮም some of them እውን ስኡሉ ተሸፊኖም እዮም ሳይን ገይሮምሎም እንትን እንዳሓፍ
So we weren't allowed to bury any of the bodies, and so they were laid out across everywhere. There were about 140, but that I saw personally was 70. I later, when I started asking about individuals, and they told me that they were dead, there was about 140 people that I knew of, and some of them, were afforded the luxury of being covered with a blanket, but others, they would kind of put rocks to label it off, because when we'd be walking, like I was walking to church, there wasn't a path to walk because they were covered in bodies, and you could smell it. It just smelled of horrifying. Like the smell was terrible. And some of them, they would put hats down. So there was a guy specifically that I knew, and he always wore this hat. So they put the hat next to his body so that we could recognize him and hopefully bury him at a later date.
My God.
But we weren't allowed to go on. If they saw anyone crying or mourning, they would kill them. They would say that we're not allowed to bury our troops, so you guys are not allowed to bury your families or cry for them. And they were saying, who's going to cry for us? Who's going to bury us?
It's almost incredulous. It's so bad. And so it's almost unbelievable if you hadn't seen it with your own eyes. Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me how you ultimately got out. I know your daughter was doing her best here, trying to advocate for you and trying to get you out of the country, but how did you make it out? Because there were no one could leave for a long time. I know that because we were trying to advocate for American citizens who were stuck in Tigray, and we were told there's nothing anyone can do. How were you? There were no flights. There is active war all around you. How did you finally get out of Hawzien?
Hawzien, now Abi radio announce gero anybody. I'm not going to know what I'm going to كلهم by Monday, نبوليتيكا هتعملوا by Monday start كقول لكم office sign كجبر له براديو تم حلالي فيلم بعلتهم تمونيو any workers now normal كخدم له خسر حلو تويلي لما قدرت أقوله نمقلة ختكد كلا خاف حوزين نمقلة ختكد كلا even car transportation يلوان even night private transportation 400 500 ناقوركي ختكد is a risk معنى اللي هو علم رابك قوري خلو من يفترو يتفلتني خي so سب ليست هو ممو نسوم كخلو خلون مقلة أور ناقلة between now وخيد كتحاوس كتخادي زاسون.
So there was an announcement made that people said that they heard that Abiy had declared that any residents of Makala, students, workers, that they needed to all return by Monday and that things were back to normal and that they had to all go to their respective jobs or offices. And there were no cars, so there were private contractors that you could take, and it was hundreds of dollars with these people, and it was also 400 a person, and there was also a huge risk along the way. So because you don't know if they're going to kill you because they think that you have money or that you're wealthy, so it was all taking a chance. But I tried to mix in with these people and make my way back to Makala.
And then so you made it to Makala, and then from Makala, were you able to fly out to Addis, or how did you get out? I know now I think the flights are operating. Were they operating at that time, or how did you get out of Makala?
Story in here, at least come Makala. The only thing I'm Makala more bearers I can read phone Nero phone. Mas applications خليلو تين I was in our office at work كدنا تأيقنا باب أو خان أو بالنيرو business يقول لك نيرو مسوي كان not trust anybody بمكينة ود كتكلم فلايت ود on time يترخ بالنيركي.
So the only thing that was better in Makala is that there was some phone connectivity, so I was able to reach some of my loved ones. But they were saying that flights were resumed and that life was back to normal and cars were operating and stuff. But I would spend days going back and forth to the airport. When I'd get there, they would say, "Oh, it's only for meetings or it's only for certain officials that flights were resumed." So I still didn't have access to get a flight.
Accessible ticket there is no internet.
And there is no internet or anything, so the only way to get a ticket is if a family member or someone sent it from you for Addis Ababa through an agency. So it still wasn't readily available to just purchase a ticket.
So then what did you do?
Finally, the family member Kali serve Rahimna Amali Addis Ababa we can take risk was it now all the way making Hawzien to Addis Ababa.
So finally we found someone through a family member who had a private car, and we told them that we would pay them, or through a friend, and we told them that we would pay them when we got to Addis Ababa and to take us with their private car, even though we knew that it was risky. That was the only chance that I had to get out of Makala.
Did you guys get stopped along the way?
Allah.
Stop.
Yeah, Allah. That's why we get 6 o'clock in the morning. The next 4 in the morning. Addis Ababa.
So, yeah, we got stopped a lot. We got stopped about 13 times.
Yeah.
About 13 times along the way.
So,
and what do they do when they stop you? Are they checking IDs and checking your what do they say when they stop you?
Even بتعمي worse نيرو even تمسانا زنبرة I took one كابانا زمتسون كاب كندا مسانا مسيو so he has a little bit different he's shavery but it's modern he thinks come if I find something فنجي or مسارة حسكم the first thing أنا نأخمي إذقات لكم.
They would search and they would look for weapons. They would look for weapons or any type of
So shaver Nero was so he get red come galafenji hadna maslina but when we turn it it's shaver, shaver.
Yeah, there was a guy that was with us. There was a Canadian resident who had something as simple as a razor, but they said that if they found any type of weapon, that they would kill us too.
Wow.
But we don't know.
I'm sure you were relieved to finally make it to Addis. I'm sure that wasn't easy. Did you guys drive straight through, or did you stop anywhere along? I mean, I can't imagine. Where would you stay?
Straight in Akhidna, even that's why it would take long time because everywhere Nakhadna, Nafatashina. we didn't get in time almost. Can they already not?
Yeah, it was over a day. We had to drive straight through, but we were stopped and searched so many different times. And the driver would like use tactics. He would give them money. He would pay them off. He would tell them to not look like the passenger. There was a couple of other people with us, and he would tell them to look away so that he could bribe them and stuff. But it took us well over a day just because of the different stops and searches that the troops were doing.
Wow. And all of this because you are Tigrayans, not because you're soldiers, not because you've done something wrong. All of this because you come from a specific ethnic group.
The driver, he was scared because he knew that we were Tigrayans, so he would tell us to try to cover our faces because of our markings that we had, and he would say that if they saw that we were Tigrayan, he would kill us. So even when we made it, we were finished with our journey, he kept telling us how lucky that we were because they should have killed us and that he never thought we would make it.
Wow. It's just really devastating. Just the things that you have seen, and you're one person. You know, I can't imagine how much is going on the ground that we just don't have access to. And, you know, there are no journalists on the ground. There is, I mean, it's because of people like you who are willing to come out and speak up and say what you've seen that we're even getting a glimpse of what's happening. What do you want people to know about what's happening in Tigray? What is your biggest fear now that you've seen it and you've come out of it?
What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
The message. You know, Tigray very, very, but I mean, like young people, Jamiru, financial, mentality, student, document them, you will tazari from you. All people who will wait on you. Kudano hope alone, but I'm tomorrow's another day. So I just goes alone. Search especially village in like Hawzien Tigray, nobody record they govern you. People ganzom 35 alone, but 35 even even the worst is the
The atrocities that are being committed in Tigray, all the way from young students, they don't have any supplies. The old people, they don't have food, medicine. Everyone's mental health is, you know, destroyed. There's no food. They're starving. They're trying to keep their hope through all of this, but we need to expose everything that's going on, from the atrocities being committed, because there is no way to document what's happening in these small villages. So these stories can't go unheard, and everyone needs to help Tigray.
Yeah, especially
they need us. They need their stories to be heard. They need to see what they're doing. They have left them with no food, no medicine, no electricity.
Don't scare. Have to be witness.
We need people to come forward and not be scared and to tell these stories, because no one else will. We have to help Tigray because no one else will.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Zainabu, for sharing your story. Thank you for your bravery on the ground. You likely saved that young man's life who was shot, the bank worker. And thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for shedding light on this very dark period in Tigray. We have some very serious issues to address, and especially the food issue. I think Abi is trying to, this is a page right out of the Derg handbook of starving the people to death. And so thank you. Thank you for sharing your story, and we'll pray for you and for the people of Tigray, and hope that by sharing your story, someone will listen. Thank you for being a voice for the voiceless.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity and this chance
thank you for having me, and
thank you for speaking out for Tigray.
Absolutely. Thank you. Again, it's day 69 of the Tigray genocide, and it's not just people who are being killed on the street that you can count. There is a food issue. People are going to die of hunger. I think the number is over 4 million people are facing hunger issues now in Tigray. And hopefully the international world will wake up and we can bring some hope to the people. So thank you so much, ladies.
You're welcome.